It's Big Ten Championship weekend as the 11-1 Penn State Nittany Lions take on the 12-0 Oregon Ducks. This will be the fifth time in the series history that they're playing, where Penn State has a 3-1 lead over the Oregon Ducks. In the first year Oregon has reached a championship game, and this is Penn State's first time appearing back into the game since 2016, where they defeated the Wisconsin Badgers 38-31. Let's welcome in Tyler Donahue for Lions247.com and Matt Prim, staff writer at DuckTerritory.com. Fellas, if Oregon defeats Penn State, Oregon's going to have to defeat all of the Big Ten champions, which are Wisconsin, Michigan, Michigan State, and Penn State, in their first year. So, Matt, how does this solidify Oregon as a new dominant force in the Big Ten in year one?
Yeah, going into the offseason, the discussion points around Oregon has always been, and for the other three Pac-12 schools that joined the conference, is could they handle the rigors and the physicality of the Big Ten, and how would they perform and how would they hold up through the grind of the season? And as you mentioned, they've held up fine. They're 12-0. They are the only team in college football to go unscathed this season. They have 8 wins with 21 or more points of a margin of victory this season. And most importantly, they would have, going into this game, they've beaten Ohio State, they've beaten the defending national champions Michigan, they've beaten Wisconsin, they've beaten Michigan State, and Penn State's the last team that's on their schedule. They originally weren't on their schedule this season of the blue bloods of the conference. And I think this is a game in which there's more at stake for just Oregon and the Big Ten championship. It's a clear indicator of, if they are to win this game, if they are able to find the path to victory, that they're just as prepared for the grind as everybody else, and the better schools, the blue bloods of this conference historically, as anyone. And this is a moment for them to show that they are more than just the flash and the speed that is associated with being the team out west.
Penn State has failed in marquee matchups. How do they shake off the ghost of recent failures to now capture their first conference championship in 8 years?
It felt like James Franklin and the Nittany Lions would have to wait until the playoffs for that opportunity and a marquee game, a ranked opponent. Nope, here's the Big Ten championship. Ohio State stumbles against Michigan, surprises a lot of us here in Happy Valley, and all of a sudden Penn State's playing the number 1 team in the country with the chance to solidify a bye week in the playoff instead of hosting a first-round game. 3-18 is James Franklin's record at Penn State against top 10 opponents. Clearly, that's not going to cut it. Ohio State and Michigan have been big problems for them previously in the Big Ten East. Now there's no more Eastern Division, and still Ohio State was a problem this year, handing Penn State its only loss in Beaver Stadium near the goal line with a big stop. On his way off the field that day, James Franklin heard some boos from the Nittany Lions crowd. People weren't feeling so good about this squad back then. Now, here's a shot at redemption for James Franklin on the biggest stage he could ask for to this point, and you can make a case that if they come away with a victory over Oregon on Saturday night in Indianapolis, it would be the biggest win of James Franklin's career to this point. You can look back at that 2016 Big Ten championship, and that surprised a lot of people, but they had 2 regular season losses at that time, so they were left out of the playoff conversation. This could launch them into the playoffs with a new narrative.
Let's get into Penn State offense versus Oregon's defense. Tyler, how can Penn State provide that balance attack on ground and in the air against that vaunted Oregon defense?
I think Nick Singleton's going to be the key here. The junior running back was freshman Big Ten Player of the Year back in 2022. Took a bit of a step back last year as a sophomore, but he came out the gates very strong this year. Over 80 rushing yards in each of the first 4 matchups, over 100 total yards in those games as well. But he hit a rough patch midseason because he was injured early October. We're not sure what the specifics were there, but it prevented him from playing against UCLA, and it really limited him throughout the month of October into early November. He had fewer than 10 touches against Ohio State, was a relative non-factor for what we'd become accustomed to. That's changed in the month of November, though. He's averaging about 6 yards per carry in the last 4 games. He told us he's feeling at 100%. James Franklin says it's easy to tell that Nick Singleton's back up to his old trick. So all of a sudden, he's a field stretcher again. He can go 70 yards on you with 1 carry. He's also had a career year as a receiver. So to me, if he's operating at full speed with Katron Allen as his sidekick there in the backfield, they can be in good shape to balance out things with Drew Aller in this passing attack, which is led by Tyler Warren at tight end, having a career year and one of the all-time great years at the tight end position in the Big Ten Conference. And they could be without their top receiver, Harrison Wallace. He missed the Maryland matchup last Saturday. James Franklin told us he tweaked something. They're monitoring his situation. So to me, offensive balance becomes paramount against this Oregon team. They can't get one-dimensional with their passing attack, especially if they're limited or missing their top receiver.
Matt, Oregon's front seven, how did they sustain and apply pressure to Penn State's offense that not giving up that many sacks?
Yeah, less than 1 a game, just 11 total this season. It's a strength-on-strength matchup here. Oregon's defense, its teeth is in its defensive line, its ability to force you into passing situations and then get after the quarterback. And that's going to be a key for Oregon here. You look at the wins against other Big Ten teams this season, whether it was UCLA early in the year in September or Ohio State in middle of October at home or Michigan in November. And then lastly, against Wisconsin on the road, and then Washington this past weekend at home. Sacks, getting to the quarterback, generating pressure, speeding up the internal clock of Oregon's opponent's quarterback has been critical. They set a program record 10 sacks against the Washington Huskies. Now, Washington's offensive line is not to the caliber of what Penn State has, so there will be a ramp up in talent here. But Oregon has leaned on its depth. They have the Big Ten's leader in sacks in Mateo Uyunglele. Jordan Birch only played in 9 games and still finished in the top 5 in the Big Ten in sacks this season. Derek Harmon's another guy with 5.5 sacks. Tatum Tuioti, another player that's had multiple sacks this season. So it's going to be about forcing Penn State into passing situations, winning on first down, putting Penn State's offense behind schedule. And then a big indicator here is going to be, can they get by with only rushing 4 or 5 guys? They did against Ohio State. They did against Michigan. And if they can, that allows them to drop guys into coverage, prepare to double team Tyler Warren, and whoever else may emerge in the passing game. And if they can't, then they have to bring pressure with other areas from the field. That opens the one-on-one situations that you want to avoid with Tyler Warren.
Let's now go to Oregon's offense versus Penn State's defense. Penn State's defense has an elite guys up front that can apply pressure without having anyone blitz. How are they going to handle this moving forward, Matt?
Yeah, it's no easy task. Abdul Carter, obviously the Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year, and rightfully so. A tremendous athlete, but it's not just him. They've got multiple guys that Oregon's players have mentioned they have to be aware of. But it's going to start with Abdul Carter. Can you prevent him from speeding up Dylan Gabriel's internal clock, and can you prevent him from having the ability to create havoc plays? And Oregon's offensive line it's done well. It's going to be up for the Joe Moore Award. Once again, they traditionally are every single year, but it hasn't been smooth sailing this season. They had a change at center to the start of the year, and then at the Oregon State game for the 3rd game of the year, they made an adjustment and put in Poncho at center from guard. Strad Strother has been inserted into the starting lineup, and then now late, they've had an injury. Marcus Harper has missed the last couple of games after suffering an injury at the Big House when they played Michigan in early November. He's expected to be back this week for the Big Ten championship game, but he's been rusty. He hasn't played since November 2nd. Communication is going to be key. The team has talked about having a clear indicator of where Abdul Carter is and being able to know that you've got a Terrence Ferguson to help chip block. You've got a running back in Jordan James who can help block, but they're going to have to know where he is at all times, or else Oregon's offense can get behind schedule.
Tyler, Can Penn State contain Oregon's ground game and explosive pass game with Dylan Gabriel and the crew?
Yeah, to me, it's about making Dylan Gabriel feel uncomfortable. I mean, this guy's seen it all, right? 3 different college programs, big-time seasons with each of them, and here he is, a Big Ten quarterback of the year. Hello, welcome to the conference. And so I'm sure he's motivated to punctuate this thing, maybe solidify his spot as a Heisman Trophy finalist. But here at Penn State, we've gotten pretty used to seeing quarterbacks get flustered by this defense, and that's really for the last few years. But this year, so much talk about Abdul Carter, and you guys covered a lot of ground there, but I want to note so much what he did in conference action. 17 and a half of his 19 and a half tackles for loss were in Big Ten play. 9 of his 10 sacks were in conference action. So he's gotten it done against, Power 4 opponents. It hasn't been, stat bulking early in the season. And so I think he's been so impressive moving from linebacker last year, where he was an all Big Ten performer. In 2022, he was a freshman All-American at linebacker. And we saw it early. He kind of had his training wheels on against West Virginia in the season opener, working his way through some of the non-conference action. Didn't always look comfortable or in the right place. That changed in a big way. He was one of their top performers in a loss against Ohio State. He obliterated offensive tackles throughout the month of November, and he reaches this point where he's now got help from denied Dennis Sutton opposite of him. Dennis Sutton's a former 5-star. He's also in year 3 like Abdul Carter, and Dennis Sutton was playing strong football for the first half of the season. However, he was injured at Wisconsin. He played fewer than 10 snaps against Ohio State, which really did hurt this team, covering the run on the edge and getting after the quarterback. He's really been back to full health or close to it for the last couple weeks. And in those matchups, 3 tackles for loss, 2 sacks. You can see opponents needing to figure out a plan in a way they didn't have to when he was limited. So talk about those 2 guys up front. And I just want to note, in the secondary, big challenge for Penn State's 2 transfer pickup at cornerback, dealing with Gabriel downfield with the weapons and the explosivity that Oregon brings. A.J. Harris came to town as a sophomore after signing with Georgia as a 5-star freshman last year. And then Jalen Kimber was a starter for the Florida Gators in 2023. They have both locked down cornerback spots. And that was an area where we had questions because of what they lost last season. They've been fantastic this season. They've been all you could ask for from a Nittany Lions standpoint. But I think really outside of Ohio State, this is the best arsenal of talent on the perimeter and downfield that they're going to get. And perhaps not just in the Big Ten, but maybe all season long. So that's a big task. If the guys up front can handle their part and the guys out back can handle their part, or they find some way to help each other, that's going to be really good for Penn State versus Dylan Gabriel, who I think is playing as confidently as any quarterback in the country right now.
Tyler, Penn State has a 3-1 lead. How do they get the 4th win? What are the keys to victory?
I think they've got to get out to a strong start in this matchup, not find themselves behind and having to play a game of catch-up. We've seen them have 4 second-half comebacks where they had a deficit at halftime. They lost a 5th game where they had a deficit at halftime against Ohio State. To me, this Oregon team is buzzing right now. They haven't felt that defeat, that taste of defeat to this point, and I think and they are really a team that if they get up by 2 scores in this matchup, it could be hard to shake them out of that frenzied state of getting to the finish line. And so to me, can Penn State go out there, prove they can go toe-to-toe with Oregon? I think we saw them jump out to a 10-0 lead over Ohio State in Beaver Stadium in November, and everyone said, okay, this is going to be different this time. But that was it, though. And so I think for the offense to get consistent penetrative drives. They don't have to get touchdowns out of them, but get field goals. Keep Oregon's offense off the field. If we're not seeing that materialize in the first quarter into the second quarter, that's going to be shades of what we've seen against Ohio State and Michigan. So I think it's a fast start for Penn State, specifically on the offensive side of the football.
Matt, undefeated in Big Ten play. How do you continue that streak? What are the keys to victory?
Yeah, I think this goes to the quarterbacks. In these types of games, I like to just look at the quarterbacks and say, who's going to be the guy that makes the big play? Who makes the big throw? The 50-50 ball that could be an interception or could be a touchdown? Who converts that play? Who gets sacked? Who doesn't feel the pressure and potentially gives up the football? Who makes the costly mistake on 3rd down? Oregon has, as Tyler noted, the most experienced quarterback in college football in Dylan Gabriel. He's on pace to set the NCAA record for most games started. No one in college football currently active has played more than he has. He has seen it all. Oregon coaches have talked about that experience at the collegiate level is invaluable. It's irreplaceable. Leaning into Dylan Gabriel and having this offense perform at a high level. That's the first and foremost part. Tyler's right for Penn State for the hot start, and it's the same case for Oregon. Like Oregon wants this game to start with a 3-and-out for Penn State, go down the field, score, get the ball back again, and score again to go up 2 scores, because that could really kind of change the game plan, make Penn State have to maybe take some risks, get away from their original game plan, take risks defensively. And that's where Oregon's really penalized some of these teams in the Big Ten this season. You look at the games against UCLA, Michigan State, Michigan, Purdue, Washington. Oregon got out to big leads in these games, and opponents had to adjust their game plans. They had to play out of their characteristics to try and keep pace with Oregon, and all have failed. Ohio State is the only school that was able to really kind of match score for score with Oregon from an offensive standpoint. And so for Oregon, it's can you do that? Can you force Penn State, to match you score for score? And if they can't, can you gain some separation? And then defensively, it just goes back to Drew Aller and the quarterbacks, like I talked about at the beginning. Can they make him make mistakes? Can they rattle his cage? Can they speed up his internal clock? And can they make the Penn State Nittany Lions turn into a one-dimensional team? And if they have to bring pressure and they have to load up the box, that creates mixed matches that they do not want to deal with Tyler Warren and with other guys within the passing game. We've seen secondary receivers have big games against Oregon because of the attention that quarterbacks draw when they have to pressure. So it's have Dylan Gabriel play well, have a fast start, and can you speed up the internal clock of Drew Aller so that he makes mistakes?
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Tyler. For more coverage on your team, for Penn State Nittany Lions, Lions247.com, and the Oregon Ducks, DuckTerritory.com.